I stepped out of my house, coffee in hand, ready to start the day. And that's when I saw it. My car, hooked up to a tow truck. The driver, dressed in uniform, was just about to press the button to lift it off the ground. And standing off to the side, watching the scene like a queen surveying her kingdom, was Karen. Her arms were crossed, her chin was lifted, and of course she had that smug little smile plastered across her face. This wasn't just another day for her. This was her victory. Karen's moment of glory. "We finally got this mess out of the neighborhood," she announced, loud enough for anyone within a 5-house radius to hear. I blinked. Then I glanced at the car, then at the tow truck driver, then back at Karen. And I laughed. I laughed so hard I had to set my coffee down on the porch railing just so I wouldn't spill it. Karen's smile twitched. She hadn't expected that. "You really did that?" I asked, shaking my head. Karen scoffed. "I told you," she said, as if she were explaining something to a particularly slow child. "No one is allowed to park like that in an HOA neighborhood." I took a deep breath, rubbing my chin thoughtfully. Then, still smiling, I said, "Karen, tell me something." I took a step closer, lowering my voice just enough to make her feel uneasy. "Who told you," I asked, "that I was in the HOA?" Karen's eyes narrowed slightly. "You live here, don't you?" she said, her tone clipped. I nodded. "I do." "Then you follow HOA rules." I tilted my head. "That's cute," I said, "but no." Karen blinked. "What do you mean no?" I gestured toward my house. "I don't know how to break this to you, Karen," I said, "but my house? It's not in the HOA." Karen's entire body stiffened. Her smile, once so full of confidence, froze in place. She looked at the tow truck driver, then back at me, her brain trying to catch up with reality. For the first time, a tiny flicker of doubt appeared in her eyes, and that was the moment she realized she might have just made a very, very big mistake. Moving into a new neighborhood is supposed to be a fresh start. New house, new neighbors, new surroundings. But no one warned me about Karen. Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, who believed her word was law and that her clipboard was the ultimate authority. Unfortunately for her, I wasn't in the HOA, and she absolutely hated that. Karen's obsession with control. Karen wasn't just any HOA president. She was the HOA president, the kind who believed every blade of grass, every mailbox, every pebble on the sidewalk should be under her jurisdiction. She didn't just enforce the rules, she created them. And then she changed them whenever she saw fit. Trash cans left out 5 minutes too long? Fine. A door painted an unapproved shade of blue? Violation notice. A car parked slightly crooked in the driveway? Warning letter. She thrived on micromanaging other people's lives, but there was one problem. She had no power over me. The HOA parking rule. The HOA had a strict parking rule, one of Karen's personal favorites. Cars must be parked inside the driveway at all times, no street parking overnight, no unsightly vehicles allowed in the neighborhood. It was ridiculous. But it only applied to HOA members, and since my house wasn't in the HOA, the rule meant nothing to me. Karen, of course, refused to accept that, because in her mind, the entire neighborhood, HOA or not, belonged to her. Karen's growing frustration. At first, it was passive-aggressive notes, slipped under my windshield wiper, taped to my front door, even mailed, yes, mailed to my house in an official-looking HOA envelope. Please adhere to community parking regulations. Your car is disrupting the neighborhood aesthetic. Failure to comply may result in enforcement action. I ignored them, because they didn't apply to me. But Karen wasn't the type to take no for an answer. She started sending HOA board members to my house. I sent them right back. She tried calling me directly. I let it go to voicemail. And that's when she snapped. She decided that if I wouldn't follow her rules voluntarily, she would force me to comply. Which is how, one morning, I stepped outside to find my car hooked up to a tow truck. And Karen, standing there, arms crossed, smiling like she had just won a war. But what she didn't realize, the real battle was just about to begin. Karen was persistent. The kind of person who believed that if she repeated a lie enough times, it would magically become the truth. And in this case, her lie was simple. She had authority over me. The warning letters begin. The first few letters were almost amusing, typed up on official-looking HOA paper with the usual nonsense about community standards and preserving neighborhood harmony. Your vehicle does not meet HOA parking requirements. Your placement disrupts the uniformity of our streets. Failure to comply will result in further action. I ignored every single one, because her rules didn't apply to me. But Karen took my silence as a challenge. Karen ups the ante. When the letters failed, she changed tactics. First, it was calls to my phone, then notes taped to my door, then HOA board members knocking on my house, looking awkward and uncomfortable. "We're just here to remind you about HOA parking regulations," one of them mumbled. I took a sip of my coffee, leaned against the door frame, and smiled. "Oh," I said. "That's cute, but I'm not in the HOA." The guy visibly winced. Well, Karen still wants compliance from..." I shut the door in his face. Karen snaps. After weeks of being ignored, Karen lost it. One morning, just as I was about to sit down with my coffee, I heard a loud commotion outside. Raised voices, the hum of an engine, the clanking of metal. I stepped onto my porch, and there it was. A tow truck back to my driveway, my car already hitched. Karen, standing off to the side, arms crossed, grinning like she had just won a war. She finally did it. She finally took action. But what she didn't realize, she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Karen stood beside the tow truck, arms crossed, looking like she had just delivered the final blow in a grand battle. Next to her, a man in uniform flipped through a ticket book, pretending to be busy. "This vehicle has been reported for violating community parking standards," Karen announced, her voice full of smug satisfaction. I leaned against my porch railing, watching the scene unfold. Something felt off. The first red flag. Karen stood there like she was handing down a royal decree, but something was missing. Where was the police car? I scanned the street. No flashing lights, no squad cars, no official insignia anywhere, just Karen, her clipboard, and a tow truck that looked like it had seen better days. The second red flag. The man holding the ticket book had the look of someone who had never written an actual ticket in his life. His uniform? A little too generic. His badge? Suspiciously blank. And when I glanced at the ticket he was writing, I noticed something else. It wasn't an actual citation. It was just a pre-printed HOA violation slip. I bit my lip to keep from laughing. The third red flag. I turned to the tow truck driver. He was standing awkwardly by the truck, shifting from foot to foot, looking uncomfortable. I caught his eye. "So," I asked casually, "you got a tow order for this?" He hesitated. "Well, Karen cut in immediately. "The order is coming from the HOA," she snapped. "That's all that matters." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, is it now?" Karen scoffed. "You should be thanking me for keeping this neighborhood in order." I tilted my head, watching her carefully. Then slowly I smiled. Because now I knew exactly what was happening. Karen had gone off the rails. She hadn't called real police. She hadn't followed legal procedure. She had tried to orchestrate her own version of law enforcement, and now she was about to face the consequences. I took a deep breath, watching the scene carefully. Karen stood tall, her arms crossed, chin lifted, radiating the same smug confidence she always had. The supposed officer beside her flipped through his ticket book, avoiding eye contact. And the tow truck driver? He looked like a man who had just realized he might be in the middle of something illegal. I decided to test the waters. A simple question. I took a step closer to the tow truck driver and gestured toward my car. "So," I said, my voice calm, "who exactly called you here?" The guy shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Karen. "Well, the HOA did," he admitted. "Mrs. Karen said we had the right to tow it." I nodded slowly. "And do you have a legal permit for this tow?" He blinked. What now?" Karen's attempt at control, before he could dig himself into a deeper hole, as Karen jumped in, her voice sharp and authoritative. "This is a private community," she snapped, "and the police are already here to enforce the rules." I turned to her, raising an eyebrow. "The police?" I repeated. Karen gestured toward the man holding the ticket book, who was now sweating slightly under the pressure. I studied him carefully. Then I smiled. "Oh, really?" The moment of doubt, Karen lifted her chin higher, doubling down. "Of course," she said. "The officer has issued a citation and the tow is happening legally." I let the words hang in the air for a moment. Then I turned back to the supposed officer. I could see it in his eyes. Panic. Panic. I took another step forward, keeping my voice light. "Well then, I said. If you're really an officer, I'm sure you wouldn't mind showing me your badge and department ID. Silence. The man's face went pale. Karen's confident smirk wavered ever so slightly. And that's when I knew she had really screwed up. The moment was perfectly still. Karen's smirk was still there, but it was flickering like a flame about to go out. The fake officer looked like he wanted to disappear into thin air. And the tow truck driver? He was already looking for an exit. I sighed, reached into my pocket, and pulled out my badge. Holding it up just high enough for everyone to see, I said calmly but firmly, "I'm a federal agent, and I think we have a big problem here." The air froze. The effect was instantaneous. The tow truck driver's eyes widened, his hand instinctively letting go of the tow controls. Karen turned pale. Not just a little pale. Pale like she had just seen a ghost. She opened her mouth, then shut it again. For the first time ever, she had nothing to say. The fake officer breaks scornful, but the real highlight? The fake cop. His eyes darted between me, my badge, and Karen, his brain clearly scrambling for a way out. I turned to him, taking a slow, deliberate step forward. "You just said," I repeated, keeping my voice low and controlled, "that you were a police officer." He immediately threw his hands up. No, I never said that," he stammered, shaking his head furiously. "I'm just an HOA security guard." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, that's funny," I said, tilting my head slightly, "because just a few minutes ago, you were writing a fake citation like it was the real thing." He gulped. Karen took a step back. The tow truck driver slowly removed his gloves, as if silently saying, "Nope, I'm not part of this." And Karen, for the first time in her power-hungry reign, she looked truly afraid. The tables had turned. Karen had always been good at controlling a room. For years, she had barked orders, issued bogus fines, and bullied residents into submission. But today, she was the one on the receiving end, and she did not know how to handle it. Karen's pathetic excuse, I don't know," Karen stammered, her voice higher pitched than usual. I just want to keep the neighborhood clean." I let out a slow chuckle, shaking my head. "Oh, I see," I said, nodding. "So keeping the neighborhood clean means running a fake police force?" Karen's face, she opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again, like a fish gasping for air. She had nothing. The security guard realizes he's screwed. I turned to the officer, who was now visibly shaking. His uniform, which had seemed official enough at first glance, now just looked cheap and poorly put together. "You know," I said, watching him carefully, "impersonating a police officer? That's a felony." The guy's face went white. Sweat beaded along his forehead as he stumbled backward, looking at Karen like she was the one who got him into this mess. I never said I was a cop," he blurted out. I raised an eyebrow. "You sure? Because I'm pretty sure I heard you say the police are here just a few minutes ago." The guy visibly gulped. The tow truck driver, who had been silent up until now, took a subtle step away, as if trying to make it very clear that he wanted nothing to do with this mess. And Karen? Karen looked like she was about to collapse, because now she knew that no amount of HOA authority could save her. Karen had spent years thinking she was untouchable. She had bullied residents, abused power, and bent every rule in the book to fit her agenda. But today, she had finally gone too far. The call that changed everything. I pulled out my phone, dialed, and brought it to my ear. Karen's eyes locked onto it immediately. Her face, already pale, somehow got even paler. "Who are you calling?" she demanded, her voice shaking just enough to betray her confidence. I ignored her, waiting for the call to connect. "Police department," a voice answered. I kept my tone calm, professional. "Yes, this is my name," I said. "I have a case of an HOA hiring fake police to enforce an illegal towing order." Karen choked on air. Karen's desperate attempt to stop me. She lunged forward, hands trembling. "No, wait," she stammered. "This is just a misunderstanding." I held up a hand, silencing her. "You had your chance to explain, Karen," I said smoothly. "Now you can explain it to the actual police." Karen looked around frantically, as if hoping someone, anyone, would come to her defense. But the tow truck driver had already stepped away from the mess. The fake security guard, fidgeting, sweating, already regretting every life decision that led him here. And the best part, neighbors had started gathering. The HOA residents start talking. People had been watching from their windows. And now they were stepping outside, whispering to each other. Did she really hire fake cops? She's finally gone too far. Oh, this is going to be good. Karen heard every word. Her reputation? Unraveling in real time. She had run the HOA like a dictatorship for years. But now she was completely alone. And with the real police on the way, she knew she was in deep trouble. 15 minutes. That's all it took. 15 minutes for Karen's empire to crumble. 15 minutes for her smug confidence to disappear. 15 minutes for her worst nightmare to arrive, with flashing lights and sirens. The real police show up. A marked police cruiser pulled into the neighborhood, coming to a stop right next to the tow truck. Two real officers stepped out, radiating authority in a way Karen's so-called police never could. Karen? She stood rigid, gripping her clipboard like it could somehow protect her from reality. The fake cop, or rather HOA security guard, was already sweating bullets. I crossed my arms, watching the scene unfold. This was about to get very interesting. Exposing the fake cop. One of the officers immediately approached the officer Karen had called. "Let's see your ID," he said, his tone firm, no nonsense. The man hesitated. Then, with shaky hands, he pulled out a badge. The officer examined it, then exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "This isn't a police badge," he said, flipping it over for his partner to see. "It's a private HOA security ID." Silence. Karen froze. The tow truck driver took another step back, as if trying to physically remove himself from this disaster. The crowd of neighbors that had gathered, now whispering louder than ever. The second officer turned to Karen. "Ma'am," he said, pulling out a notepad, "are you the one who called this in?" Karen licked her lips nervously. I was just trying to enforce HOA rules," she stammered. The officer narrowed his eyes. "Did you knowingly allow a private security guard to pose as law enforcement?" Karen's face went pale. "No, But she couldn't finish the sentence, because she knew she had just walked herself into a serious legal problem. Hit hard. The officers exchanged glances. One of them turned to me. "You said this was an illegal towing attempt?" I nodded. "Yep. No legal order, no jurisdiction, just an HOA president who thinks she's above the law." The officer sighed, jotting something down. "Well, that's going to be a problem," he muttered. "The HOA could be facing up to $50,000 in fines for abuse of power and impersonation of law enforcement." Karen's legs wobbled. The HOA board members who had started gatherings, hoping to back her up, were now slowly backing away, because they knew Karen was done, and now there was nothing they could do to save her. Karen had spent years building her little kingdom. She had controlled everything from mailbox colors to grass height, convinced that her power was absolute. But today, her kingdom was collapsing. The emergency HOA meeting. That same evening, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. The clubhouse was packed, not with the usual bored homeowners pretending to care about landscaping rules, but with angry residents who had finally had enough. Karen sat at the front of the room, clutching her clipboard like a life raft. She tried to look calm, confident, but the murmurs, the glares, the absolute fury radiating from the crowd told a different story. The residents' revolt. The meeting started, and within seconds, people started speaking up. "She lied to us. She made us think she had real cops backing her up. She's been abusing power for years, and now we have to pay for it?" I moved for an immediate recall vote. Karen shot up from her seat. "Wait," she stammered. "You're all misunderstanding what happened." The residents weren't buying it. Someone in the back shouted, "We're not misunderstanding anything. You got us sued." A second voice chimed in. "You're an embarrassment, Karen." Karen's face turned red, her hands shaking. She had ruled with fear for years. But now, no one feared her anymore. "Karen is officially removed." One of the board members stood up, clearing his throat. "It's clear that leadership changes are necessary," he said. A second member nodded. "I move for a vote to immediately remove Karen as HOA president." Karen's head snapped up. "You can't." I second it. The vote was unanimous. Karen was officially removed. The clipboard, her symbol of power, slipped from her hands and hit the floor with a dull thud. The HOA collapses completely, But the nightmare wasn't over yet. The HOA was now facing multiple lawsuits. Residents who had been unfairly fined demanded refunds. The legal fees from the police investigation drained the HOA's funds. Many homeowners, fed up with the corruption, voted to dissolve the HOA entirely. Within weeks, the HOA was no more. Karen had built her own personal empire, and now it was gone. Karen's final defeat. With no power left, Karen had no choice but to leave. She quietly put her house up for sale and packed her bags. There was no farewell speech, no dramatic exit, just a moving truck and a woman who had once thought she was invincible. Now, she was just another failed HOA dictator. And the neighborhood? Finally free. Karen was gone. The HOA? Dissolved. And my car? Perfectly fine. No damage, no scratches, just sitting exactly where it belonged, untouched by Karen's failed attempt at dictatorship. The aftermath. The real police, after wrapping up their investigation, approached me. One of the officers, looking a little embarrassed, cleared his throat. "Sorry about the confusion," he said. "We'll make sure this never happens again." I grinned, shaking my head. "It's okay," I said, chuckling. "I like to watch a good show." The officer laughed, shook my hand, and left. The tow truck, gone. The fake cop, probably halfway to another state. Karen, standing there in absolute silence, defeated. For the first time in years, she had nothing. A curious question. As I got into my car, a young boy from the neighborhood ran up to me. He stopped just a few feet away, staring at me with wide, shining eyes. "Hey," he said hesitantly, "are you really an FBI agent?" I smirked, lowering my sunglasses slightly to look at him. "If I tell you," I said, leaning in slightly, "you'll have to erase my memory." The boy's eyes widened even more, and he gasped, like he had just stumbled onto some top-secret government secret. Then, laughing, he ran off. Karen's final defeat. I started my car, rolling down the window for one last glance. Karen still stood there. No clipboard, no power, no control. Just a woman who had spent her life believing she was above the law, only to find out too late that she wasn't. With one last look, I put my sunglasses back on, shifted into gear, and drove away. Justice had been served, and damn, did it feel good.